All right, so today we're diving into cloud-native Python. And to guide us on this little adventure, we've got some excerpts from the book, you guessed it, Cloud-Native Python.
That's right. We're going to break it all down for you, the why, what, how, so you walk away with those nuggets of wisdom you can actually use. Whether you're just dipping your toes in the cloud native pool or you're already doing laps, there's something in here for you.
Now, the book jumps right in talking about the massive Python community, like millions of developers worldwide. I'm guessing that's not just a coincidence when it comes to building for the cloud.
You're catching on quick. That huge community translates to massive support for cloud native development. Think tons of libraries, shared code. It's like having a global network of Python expert on call 24/7. If you hit a roadblock, chances are someone's already found a detour and shared the map.
Makes sense. Now, full transparency, this book is from 2017. I know things change fast in tech, so how does it hold up in today's world?
Good point. The cloud landscape definitely evolves fast. But the thing is, this book focuses on those fundamental principles, the bedrock of building for the cloud. That foundation, it's timeless. Like building a house, you might swap out appliances, but the structure itself, that's got to be solid from day one.
And cloud-native Python is our blueprint for that rock-solid foundation. What's the first building block?
It dives right into why Python is such a natural fit for the cloud. You've got its readability, the fantastic libraries we mentioned, and of course that strong community support, all super crucial when you need your apps to be flexible, scalable, and ready to grow.
Right, nobody wants to rebuild their app every time it needs to level up. Something I found really intriguing was this 12-factor app concept the book digs into. Sounds kind of like a secret society for elite apps.
A little bit, yeah. Think of it as like a set of guidelines for building apps that are robust, scalable, and ready to deploy in a snap. Basically, apps designed to not just survive, but actually thrive in the cloud.
Okay, I like where this is going. So for someone listening who wants to get up and running quickly, what's like a key takeaway here?
One of the biggies is treating your backing services like databases as attached resources. Instead of hardwiring those connections, you make them configurable. It's like swapping out a phone case. You can easily switch between development, testing, production. No need to rip the whole thing apart.
Less time wrestling with settings, more time building cool stuff.
Exactly. And speaking of building cool stuff, the book also dives into microservices. It's like taking that efficiency idea to a whole other level.
Okay, microservices.
Okay.
I've heard the term thrown around, but I wouldn't mind a little refresher. The book actually has a diagram to help illustrate this, right?
Yeah, it does, and it's a great visual. Basically, instead of building one massive application, you break it down into these smaller, independent services. Think of it like a well-coordinated team. Each service has its own specialty, like handling payments or managing user profiles. They communicate with each other to get the job done, but they're not all tangled up in one giant blob of code.
So like a well-oiled machine, each part with its own purpose. Definitely see how that would be more efficient.
Exactly. And not just efficient, but more resilient, too. Imagine if Amazon crashed every time a single product page had a glitch. Chaos. With microservices, if one service goes down, the whole system doesn't necessarily come crashing down with it.
Like a disaster I don't even want to think about.
Uh,
Okay, so we've got these efficient, resilient microservices up and running. What's next?
well, we've got to make sure those services are actually working the way they're supposed to, which brings us to testing. And this is key. We never want to skip this step. The book does a really good job of breaking down the different types of testing that are crucial for any cloud-native app.
Absolutely, because releasing buggy software is never a good look. What kind of testing are we talking here?
So they break it down into three main categories: functional, non-functional, and structural. Functional testing is all about making sure your app does what it's supposed to do. Click a button, does it actually submit the form, that sort of thing. Then you have non-functional testing, which focuses on things like performance, how fast does it load, security, is it safe from those digital intruders, and usability is actually pleasant to use.
Okay, I'm tracking.
And lastly, there's structural testing, which is like looking under the hood to make sure the code itself is well organized and efficient.
Got it. Making sure the engine is running smooth, even if I don't know much about cars myself.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really practical. For someone like you who values speed and efficiency, the book really emphasizes this thing called unit testing. This is where you're testing individual units of your code in isolation. Think of it like checking each ingredient before you bake a cake, much better than discovering a problem once it's already in the oven.
Small tests, big wins.
Hmm.
Now let's talk about something that's probably on everyone's mind these days. Security. We're building these awesome cloud-native apps, but we definitely don't want them to be vulnerable to attacks.
Absolutely not. The book highlights some common security risks, like this thing called a SYN flood attack.
Uh-oh, that sounds ominous. What in the world is that?
Imagine a horde of zombies trying to break down your app's door all at once. That's kind of what a SYN flood attack is. It's a denial of service attack, basically trying to overwhelm your app with connection requests, which can cripple it completely. Not a good time.
Definitely not.
Hmm.
Okay, so how do we protect our apps from these digital zombies?
The book talks about a couple of key things. First up, there's CORS, cross-origin resource sharing.
Core. I'll be honest, that sounds a little intimidating.
It's not as scary as it sounds. Think of CORS as the bouncer at the door of your app, checking IDs to make sure only authorized requests from trusted websites are allowed in. It helps prevent malicious actors from hijacking your app's functionality.
So it's like the first line of defense. But we're not just letting anyone in, right?
Mhm.
We need to make sure they are who they say they are.
Exactly. That's where authentication comes in. And the book digs into some smart ways to handle that. And we'll get into all that right after the break. Don't go anywhere because we're just getting started on this cloud-native journey.
So before the break, we were talking about keeping those digital gate crashers out with authentication. What are some good ways to go about that?
Well, Cloud Native Python gets into the nuts and bolts of it. It covers a bunch of different methods from the classic username and password combo to using API keys, even tapping into third-party providers like, say, Google or Auth.
Auth0, you say. Now, for those of us who aren't swimming in the deep end of the tech pool, what exactly is that?
Basically, it's authentication as a service. Instead of building your own complex authentication system from the ground up, you can outsource it to the experts like Auth. They handle all the tricky stuff, secure password storage, two-factor authentication, all that, so you can focus on what you do best, building your app.
So kind of like hiring a cybersecurity firm to be your app's personal bodyguard.
Exactly. It takes a load off your plate.
Love it. Okay, so we've got multiple ways to lock down our apps. But for someone listening who's maybe just starting to think about security, what's like the key takeaway here?
Don't treat security like an afterthought. It's way easier to build a secure app from day one than try to bolt on security measures later.
Like they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Speaking of prevention, what other practical advice does the book offer in terms of building secure apps?
Oh, it's full of it. One big one, never trust user input. Always validate that data coming in from the outside world. It also stresses the importance of protecting sensitive data and, of course, staying up to date on those security best practices. Things are constantly changing, so you got to stay sharp.
Always be learning, right? All right, so we've covered a lot of ground why Python's great for the cloud, the 12-factor app, breaking things down with microservices, thorough testing, and now locking it all down with some solid security. What else does this book have up its sleeve?
Well, it also dives into a concept that I think any developer can get behind: continuous delivery, or CD for short.
AD.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those buzzwords you hear everywhere. But I'll be honest, I'm not always 100% sure people know what it really means.
It's all about streamlining that development process. Imagine this. Every time you make a change to your code, it automatically gets tested, packaged up, and deployed to your users. Like magic. No manual intervention required.
Okay, that does sound pretty magical. But how does that actually work in the real world?
That's where tools like Jenkins enter the picture. The book actually walks you through setting up a whole CD pipeline using Jenkins, which is a popular open source automation server.
So Jenkins is like the conductor of our automation orchestra.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
It orchestrates all those different steps involved in getting your code from your computer to your users' devices, running tests, building your app, packaging it up, deploying it to your cloud platform, all automatically.
Less manual work, fewer errors, faster releases, automation for the win. I'm curious, how does this all tie back to the 12-factor app concept we were talking about earlier? They seem connected somehow.
They definitely are. Continuous delivery goes hand in hand with those 12 factors. For example, one of those factors is all about having a strict separation between the build, release, and run stages of your application. CD helps you enforce this separation because it automates each stage and clearly defines the transitions between them.
So it's like CD is the glue that holds all those best practices together.
You got it. And here's where it gets really exciting. The book doesn't just talk the talk. It walks you through deploying a real live cloud-native Python app on both AWS and Azure.
Whoa, hold on. 2 different cloud platforms. That's impressive.
It is a lot to cover, but the book does an amazing job of distilling those essential concepts that apply across both platforms. So instead of getting bogged down in the platform-specific details, it focuses on those core concepts of cloud deployment. We're talking setting virtual machines, configuring networks, managing databases, and of course, deploying your app.
So it's like having a bilingual tour guide showing you all of the sites in both English and Python.
I like that. And it even touches on these things called infrastructure as code tools, things like Terraform and CloudFormation. With these tools, you can actually define your entire infrastructure in code. So now you can treat it just like any other software project. Version control, automated testing, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, now we're talking some serious cloud power.
We are. But don't worry, the book explains it all in a way that anyone can understand, even if you're new to this whole cloud thing. And that's the beauty of cloud native Python. It meets you where you are and takes you on a journey to cloud competency.
Speaking of journeys, this deep dive has been quite the ride. But we're not done yet, are we? We've built our app, we've deployed it to the cloud, but what happens next?
That's where monitoring comes in. We don't just want to set our app free in the cloud and hope for the best. We'll dive into that crucial world of monitoring, making sure your cloud-native masterpiece is running like a well-oiled machine right after the break.
All right, so we're back. We've journeyed through building our cloud-native Python app, deploying it, making sure it's secure. Basically, we set it free out into the world.
It's like sending your kid off to college.
Exactly. But as any good parent or developer knows, the work doesn't stop once you launch them.
Yeah.
You got to keep an eye on things, right?
Right, and that's where monitoring comes in. And Cloud Native Python, they dedicate a whole chapter to this. It's like having a baby monitor, but for your code. You want to know if it's thriving or if it needs a little help.
Because even the most well-coded app, it can hit a snag out there in the wilds of the internet.
Oh, absolutely. Server hiccups, unexpected traffic, like maybe your app goes viral, who knows? Or even those pesky bugs you thought you squashed, they can always reappear. Monitoring helps you catch these issues early on before they become those major headaches nobody wants.
It's like an early warning system.
Exactly.
Okay, so how does this actually work? What tools are we using to look under the hood while everything's running?
Well, the book walks you through a bunch of different options from those cloud-specific services to some of the good old open source tools. So if you're on AWS, CloudWatch is your best friend. It's like this dashboard that shows you all the vital signs of your app in real time: CPU usage, network traffic, disk space, all that good stuff.
So you can tell if your app is working up a sweat or just sort of coasting along.
Precisely. And you can even set alarms, right? So CloudWatch will actually ping you if things start to go sideways.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be glued to the screen 24/7.
Exactly. Now, if you're on the Azure side of things, they have something called Application Insights that gives you similar metrics like CloudWatch, but it also gets at some cool stuff like tracking how users are actually interacting with your app.
Oh, interesting. So you can see which features are a hit, which ones people are maybe not loving so much.
Yeah. Now, if you're more of a do-it-yourself kind of developer, the book also gets into the ELK stack.
ELK stack now, that one rings a bell. Give me a quick refresher, though.
Yeah, so ELK stands for Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. It's a powerful trio. Picture this. Elasticsearch is like a massive library for all your app data. It can store and search through mountains of information. And then you've got Logstash, which is like the super organized librarian, gathering and organizing all those logs from your app. And then finally, there's Kibana, which is how you make sense of it all. It lets you visualize the data with charts, graphs, dashboards, you name it.
So it's like having this team of data detectives. They gather the evidence, they analyze it, and then they present you with a nice, clear report on what's going on.
I like that. That's a great way to put it. And the beauty of the ELK stack is its flexibility. You can use it to monitor pretty much anything from your server's heartbeat to how users are navigating your app.
Powerful stuff.
It is.
Dude.
And the book doesn't stop there. It even introduces you to Prometheus.
Prometheus. Okay, now that definitely rings a bell. Wasn't he a Greek titan who stole fire from the gods?
That's the one. And just like Prometheus brought fire to humanity, this Prometheus, it brings the fire of insight to your monitoring setup. It's open source, and it's known for being able to handle a truly massive amount of data.
I love it. So to wrap things up here, if there's one thing someone takes away from this whole deep dive into cloud-native Python, what should it be?
I think the biggest takeaway is that this book, even though it came out in 2017, it still holds up. It's a fantastic starting point, that foundation, for anyone who wants to build amazing things in the cloud using Python.
And the journey doesn't end there. The cloud's always changing. There's always something new to learn. But the concepts we've covered in this deep dive, from those core 12-factor principles to the nuts and bolts of monitoring those, are your tools to navigate this ever-evolving world of cloud-native development. So keep experimenting, keep building, and most importantly, keep those learning engines running.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
That's it for this deep dive into cloud-native Python. Until next time, happy coding.